The night sky over the Persian Gulf had barely settled when the order came through. Not through military channels, not through backroom diplomacy. It came through a social media post, typed from a private residence in Florida, and it landed on the world like a bomb. At exactly 23:44 Greenwich Mean Time on Saturday, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, "If Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first." The words were written in all capitals, the way a general barks a final order before the shooting starts. The message was clear. The clock was now ticking. To understand what was happening in that moment, one had to understand where this war had come from. The United States and Israel launched their attacks on Iran on February 28th, sparking swift retaliation from the Islamic Republic and triggering a wider war in the region. Late last month, American and Israeli forces targeted key military targets in Iran and killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and other government leaders. Iran responded by launching missiles and drones targeting Israel and several Gulf Arab states that host U.S. armed forces. Now the war had entered its fourth week, and at the center of everything was a narrow strip of water. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow yet incredibly strategically important waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. At its narrowest point, the strait is about 21 miles wide. Around 20% of global oil trade passes through the strait, with any disruption often spiking global prices. Iran understood this well. Since the very first days of the war, Tehran had used the strait as its most powerful weapon, not bombs, not missiles, a chokehold. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has sharply declined amid the war after Iranian threats, missile and drone attacks near the waterway, and U.S. military strikes on suspected Iranian mine-laying vessels. Many shipping companies and insurers have pulled back because of safety risks and soaring insurance costs, effectively halting commercial traffic even without a formal blockade. The tankers sat still, the oil sat still, and the rest of the world started to feel it. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil depends on the Strait of Hormuz. With it choked off, the U.S. national average for a gallon of gas hit $3.94 on Sunday morning, according to AAA, up more than $1 from a month earlier. The price of Brent crude, the international benchmark, soared to over $100 per barrel, around $106 on Saturday. The economic pressure was mounting. Ordinary people at gas stations in Ohio, in Texas, and California were paying the price of a war being fought thousands of miles away. Back in Washington, the pressure on the president was becoming harder to ignore. The threat marked a dramatic reversal from just a day earlier, when Trump floated ending the war without reopening the strait, signaling the Hormuz crisis had become the issue he could not walk away from, even as he looked for an exit. On Friday, just 24 hours before the ultimatum, Trump had told reporters that reopening the strait was a simple military maneuver. He added that NATO hadn't had the courage to assist the U.S. with reopening the waterway. Those words stung. The alliance said nothing in return, and the strait remained closed. Meanwhile, U.S. forces had not been standing idle. The head of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, asserted on Saturday that Iran's ability to attack vessels on the strait had been degraded after U.S. fighter jets dropped 5,000-pound bombs on an underground Iranian coastal facility storing anti-ship cruise missiles and mobile launchers. The military had done its work. The passage was being cleared inch by inch, but Iran held firm. Then came Saturday night, the ultimatum. Iran did not flinch. Within hours, the response came, loud, sharp, and defiant. The Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, the central command of the Iranian armed forces, said it would fully close the Strait of Hormuz if America's threats regarding Iran's power plants were carried out. Iran also warned that it would start targeting all power plants, energy infrastructure, and information technology, while any company in the region with American shareholders would also become a target. Iran threatened to attack the power plants of any country in the region hosting American military bases. Everything is ready for a great jihad, with the aim of completely destroying all economic interests of America in the Middle East, the statement said. These were not the words of a government preparing to surrender. These were the words of a government preparing to fight. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, threatened to irreversibly destroy vital infrastructure across the region if the U.S. carried out Trump's threat. Immediately after the power plants and infrastructure in our country are targeted, the critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and oil facilities throughout the region will be considered legitimate targets and will be destroyed in an irreversible manner, and the price of oil will remain high for a long time, Ghalibaf wrote on X. While all of this was unfolding, the guns had not gone quiet elsewhere. Iranian missiles struck 2 communities in southern Israel late on Saturday, leaving buildings shattered and dozens injured in dual attacks not far from Israel's main nuclear research center. The war was not confined to diplomatic threats and social media posts. People were being hurt. Buildings were falling. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian did not sound like a man ready to stand down. He said threats and terror were strengthening Iranian unity, adding, "The Strait of Hormuz is open to all except those who violate our soil. We firmly confront delirious threats on the battlefield." Iran's new Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei reaffirmed that the strait would remain closed until the conflict ended. There was no room for ambiguity there. Analysts watching from a distance were not surprised. Anise Basiri Tabrizi, an associate fellow at Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program, said it was unlikely Tehran would cave into the pressure Trump was seeking to build. "I think this is the result of lack of planning and the fact that the Trump administration didn't foresee the response from the Iranian side," she said. "But the threats are not likely to have any impact, and Iran is actually going to continue trying to escalate the costs." On the diplomatic front, movement was happening, but slowly. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said he hoped to re-establish talks between Iran and the U.S. about Tehran's nuclear program, despite the escalating nature of the conflict. The IAEA director was walking a tightrope over a burning chasm. Meanwhile, the Trump administration announced it would temporarily lift sanctions on Iranian oil already at sea as of Friday, the first such relief in decades, in an attempt to ease skyrocketing energy prices. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the move would bring approximately 140 million barrels to global markets, though analysts noted that figure represents only a few days of global supply and is unlikely to meaningfully offset the disruption. Iran, for its part, had been selective about who it allowed through the strait. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said he had been approached by a number of countries seeking safe passage for their vessels, noting that a group of ships from different countries had been allowed to pass. Japan was among those seeking exemptions. Iran's foreign minister told Kyodo News that Iran was prepared to ensure safe passage for Japanese vessels, noting that Japan, the world's fourth largest economy, imports 95% of its oil from the Middle East, with 70% passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The picture that emerged was one of a waterway that was not entirely shut, but not truly open either, a weapon being wielded with precision by a country that knew its value. And through all of this, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged other nations to join the war against Iran, saying, "It's for the security of the entire world." He pointed to the Iranian missile that had been fired toward Diego Garcia, a key U.S.-UK military base in the Indian Ocean, as evidence of the regime's growing reach and ambition. As Sunday, March the 22nd began, the 48-hour clock was running. The tankers remained anchored. The strait remained tense. Power plants across Iran stood as silent targets in a game of nerve that neither side appeared ready to lose. The world watched. The oil markets trembled. And somewhere above the narrow blue waters where this all now rested, the next move was being calculated by generals, by presidents, by supreme leaders, and by whoever was brave enough or desperate enough to make it.